Okay, am I on? Yes. So I shouldn't move much, right, with this camera? Okay. Well, I see we have a big crowd here. But it's the power of the crowd, and I know there's a bunch of people on Zoom. So I'm really glad to be here in person. And I know maybe some of you are glad to be here in person too. It's been an interesting 2 years, and you all know better than I do about what it was like for healthcare providers. So thank you so much. It's really an honor to represent you, because I have a lot of friends who have nurse practitioners as their primary care provider, including myself. And they always say to me, you know, my nurse practitioner spends so much more time listening to me and then deciding or recommending what I can do. And one of my friends goes to a rheumatologist, and there was a nurse practitioner there that was her primary person. And when the nurse practitioner left, she called me up and said, can you find out where my nurse practitioner went? Because I want to go wherever she went, because she was the one providing care. So I know you all know you have a wonderful reputation, and thank you so much for what you do. So this is what I do: legislation, advocacy, bureaucracy. I get calls from many of you all the time about some impediment to your practice, some problem with you can't sign this form and you can't sign that form, or people want you to do things that you're not supposed to do. And it's always wonderful to be able to help you. And lots of advocacy with health insurance companies who go, oh, well, nurse practitioners can't do that. And it's like, oh, yes, they can. So feel free to call me anytime. Sometimes you call Rachel, Rachel lets me know, and you can call me directly, because I am always happy to help you. All right, let's talk about the legislature. We just finished the session. It was, well, a couple months ago. It was a 30-day session. And 30-day sessions are supposed to be just about money. And this one was definitely about money, because there was a lot of money, a lot of federal money, and a lot of money from the revenues in New Mexico, particularly oil and gas and other extractive industries, which are sending billions of dollars to our budget. And the legislature passed the largest budget in our history. It's about an $8.5 billion budget. Now, those of you who may have lived in Los Angeles or a big city, that doesn't sound like very much. That 8.5 billion for the whole state, when, you know, one little area in LA has a $8.5 billion budget. But for us, it is huge. And because of that, we were able to do some really great things, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay. All right, we'll just do it the old-fashioned way, if that would work. Okay. All right, where did you push? Just the. Okay, I tried that. All right. So as I said, 30-day session. There were about, 502 bills introduced. A lot of them were not germane, because as I said, in a 30-day session, it's just about money. So if a bill is a substantive bill to change a law, it can't go on the 30-day agenda unless the governor gives it a message, unless the governor says, okay, you can put that bill on. So a lot of legislators, they just introduce bills for fun and hope that maybe they'll get a message, but apparently they didn't. 64 bills actually passed, and of course, some of those were funding bills, the big budget. And the governor vetoed only 7 of those bills. And you may have read that she vetoed what was called the junior bill. That was quite a controversy. It was a $50 million appropriation bill where every legislator got a little pot of money, and a little pot of money. Each senator got 1.7 million and each House member got 650,000. But they got that money and they could allocate it to pretty much anybody they wanted, any entity in government that they wanted, or any nonprofit that contracts with government. So like I happen to represent the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we got 1.5 million to various different domestic violence programs throughout the state. And so legislators gave to all kinds of entities with that 50 million. And the governor told them before the session she didn't like that bill and she didn't want it. And they did it anyway, and so she vetoed it. And then all hell broke loose because all the legislators were mad because they had gotten money for these different constituency groups in their district, and suddenly it's vetoed. So there was a threat of a veto override, and the legislature calling themselves back in. The legislature has only called itself back in one time in the history of the legislature. And that was during Gary Johnson's term, not that long ago, when he vetoed the entire state budget and said he wasn't going to call the legislators back. So they called themselves back in. So it's really embarrassing to a governor, and it would have been really embarrassing to Governor Lujan Grisham had they called themselves back in and overrode her veto. So they all got together and they worked it out. And it did come up in the special session I'll mention in a second. So that story did end well. So what were the bills introduced relevant to nurses, nurse practitioners, nurse midwives? Every year, the legislature introduces expanding the rural tax credit. Now, I have a question for you. Does anybody here live in a rural area or serve in a rural area and get a rural tax credit? Great, about 5 of you. Wonderful. I'm glad you're doing that. So there are a limited number of providers that actually get the rural tax credit. And it was in 2007 that I got nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, CRNAs, all into the rural tax credit language. So now, but the physicians are at 5,000 and your category is at 3,000, which, you know, that's how they do things, and that's what we got. So every year, different healthcare groups try to get into the rural tax credit because it's physicians, psychologists, the advanced practice nurses, and I think that's it. It's not very many. So who wants in? Social workers, PTs, OTs, chiropractors, acupuncturists. Everybody wants to get into the rural tax credit. So all these bills are introduced to try to expand the rural tax credit. And they have been doing that. There has not been an amendment since our amendment in 2007. So every year since 2007, we all the lobbyists go and try to get more people in the rural tax credit. And it just is, so far, it has failed. And it has failed because it's hard to convince the legislature that this is actually something that helps people serve in a rural community. Because the question becomes, okay, does a $3,000 or $5,000 tax credit make you want to move to a rural community and serve that community? Probably not, but it may help you stay. Or if you live, I suspect some of you don't necessarily live in a rural area, but you serve a rural area, so you get that tax credit. So we don't really have any evidence that this helps recruit providers or keep providers. And that's something that we are going to address in the future. So all of those bills. I'm sorry, what? Right. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Yes. Okay, my buttons aren't seeming to work. So what is your trick? Push here and then here?
I just click onto it.
Okay. All right, so none of those passed. But we also did a bill to give $1,000 tax credit to any nurse who works in a hospital full-time for the 2022 calendar year. And there's a whole process, application process. So, and you know, I kind of did that bill because we have seen so much dedication by the RNs and the LPNs in the hospitals. And it's just, and heard about how difficult and how overworked and no PPE in the beginning and all the issues, that I wanted to bring it to the legislature and say, you know, you need to do something for these nurses. And I didn't think it had a chance in hell of passing. And the bill itself did not pass. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. Oh, okay, here it is. So what happens with tax bills is they all get rolled into an omnibus tax bill, one big bill. So that one big bill was House Bill 163. So I started working the tax committee to try to get that $1,000 tax credit added into the omnibus bill. And a miracle happened. The angels were on our side, and they put this tax credit into the omnibus bill. And it was just like, I was so happy for everyone that, again, an acknowledgement of, I mean, $1,000 tax credit for what's happened for 2 years, not particularly impactful, but the acknowledgement to say, for the state of New Mexico to say thank you to all the RNs working in the hospital in 2022. So that bill, that language got in the omnibus tax package and passed and was signed by the governor. All right, there was another bill that was really important to us because we've been working with the Board of Nursing for a couple of years, trying to, constant complaints to Rachel, to Deborah Walker at the Nursing Association, to all the nursing groups about the difficulty for people coming in this state to get a license, that it's taking months when it shouldn't take that much time. And even before the pandemic, the problems were there. So the Regulation and Licensing Department also wanted to make some changes so that they could issue expedited licenses to all the healthcare providers under their control. So as you all know, the Board of Nursing is independent of the Regulation and Licensing Department, and the Regulation and Licensing Department has all the other healthcare provider groups except the docs, the nurses, and who is that third? It's not pharmacy, it's pharmacy. I can't think of the third one. Maybe there's only two. So everybody else is under RLD. And RLD, the superintendent of RLD, used to be a legislator, wanted to help all these other licensing boards expedite their licenses, because I also represent some other healthcare providers, and every provider group has problems with their licensing board and not someone comes to the state and it takes months to get a license. So what this bill does is, and it applies to the RLD and to the Board of Nursing, when a person with a license from another state comes to New Mexico and they don't have any discipline against that license, they within 30 days get a New Mexico license, period. And it's a temporary license, good for 1 year. So we have this requirement that you have to, get your NCLEX and prove that you took it, even though no state in this country that I'm aware of in the United States gives you a license without having the NCLEX or whatever the prior testing was. So if you come to this state, you have taken the NCLEX or whatever test there was there. And this temporary license is good for the 1 year. So then you have the year in order to get all the extra paperwork that we seem to need in New Mexico. And the dean at UNM, Dean Casper, was telling me the story of when she came here with, that was 5 or 6 years ago, 4 years ago, and she had a license in 4 other states, and she could not get her nursing license here for months and months and months, because she had to have California dig out her NCLEX test from the 70s or something and send it to New Mexico. Well, that is ridiculous. So when this law goes into effect in, I think, another 6 months, every healthcare licensing entity except the docs will have to comply with this and issue a temporary license for 1 year. This is huge, I think, and we're very happy about that. Okay, now the really fun part. Since we had all this money, it seemed like, isn't this an opportunity for us to just start in a tiny way to address the nursing crisis in our state? And we know from the workforce reports that we're over 6,200 nurses short, RNs short in our state, based on all the comparison data of what you should have. And we know from our experiences with the last 2 years that so many hospitals had to hire travelers because we didn't have people here. I mean, we won't talk about the travelers now, it's a whole other issue, but we don't have enough nurses in New Mexico, enough of our own nurses. And there is only one way to solve this problem, and that is to educate more nurses in New Mexico. They are not going to move here. In the last 10 years, the last decade, our population grew by less than 2%. We have like a couple 100,000 more people in 2020 than we had in 2010. People are not moving here, and nurses are not moving here, and doctors are not moving here. So we need to grow our own nurses. We need to educate our own nurses. And so we were able to get this 15 million to just begin to start letting the schools of nursing apply and expand their number of students that they can accept. We also got 30 million for a nursing faculty endowment, because I know there's some faculty here, and we know that the salaries aren't always comparable with what you can make elsewhere. And so we need to get those salaries up, particularly in the community colleges and some of the branch schools, I think. So this endowment, all the schools will be able to apply for this money. UNM got 1.6 million to expand the nursing program, the nurse practitioner program. That's great, because we desperately need more nurse practitioners. And then this is a very interesting one, this $4 million, with 1 million going to Eastern, Western, San Juan, and Highlands. So Senator Munoz from McKinley County, he's the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, and he's one of the first legislators I started working with to try to get this 15 million. And he just suddenly became a nursing champion. And what he did was took some of the one-time only money, and he gave $1 million in the budget. This was his idea, to those 4 schools to use however they want to support those nursing students that are already there, or that they're acquiring with the other money, and to support them with housing or books or transportation, whatever. It's sort of like wide open to help those students not have to worry about working or what are their families, so that they have enough money. It's an interesting idea. We'll see how it works. Because of course, one of the great bills that passed also this session was the Opportunity Scholarship, which is scholarships available to people in New Mexico to go to have their tuition paid for at any college or university. And you don't have to go full time. You can take 6 hours or more. And so hopefully that's going to attract people back into the workforce. And that there's 50 million? I don't know, there's a lot of millions for Opportunity Scholarship. And that's in addition to the lottery scholarship that we have. They're really, with this new money available for students, it gives such an opportunity to people in our state who want to go back to school and with any kind of profession. And here's the professions we need: education, teachers, and people in certain businesses. And this hopefully is really going to, this expansion will help get people involved, help get people back. So those, of course, were all signed and supported by the governor. Okay, so I just want to put this in your mind that next session is a 60-day session. It's the time when we can go back in and fix those statutes that are still screwed up that we tried to fix. We did a big omnibus bill about 7 or 8 years ago, where everywhere it said physician, we also added APRN. And we did a search of all the statutes, and we changed a lot of different statutes that were appropriate to adding you all as a provider. And a lot of them were signatures and other issues. And obviously we didn't find them all, because Kathy Vasquez brought to me the fact that you can't sign the form for a child who, because of health reasons, shouldn't have an immunization of some kind. It can only be signed by a doctor. So if you have a patient, you have a kid patient, you have to send them somewhere else because you can't sign the form. Well, we did introduce that bill, and the last 60 days, and it got caught up, but we're going to do it again. I just got a call, Rachel got a call about the Game Commission. They give some kind of, if you're disabled and you need to use a wheelchair to go hunting, that only a physician can sign a form saying that you have to have a wheelchair to go hunting. I don't really understand all that hunting in a wheelchair, but other disabilities too. So, you know, there's another one to change. And they keep coming up. Several years ago, somebody called me about that. What was it? Oh, it was getting the results of an autopsy from the medical examiner on your patient, and you couldn't get it if you were a nurse practitioner. Only doctors could get it. That we resolved with rules, but they're just coming up all the time. And you all know what they are because you run into them. So let us know, let Rachel know, let me know, so we can go back in 23 and fix this. And there may be, we'll be looking at other areas of healthcare to see what exciting things we need to try to do in 2023. And of course, we'll be going after more money to expand the schools of nursing, because $15 million is only the beginning. And we're going to need hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's time for the legislature and the state of New Mexico to pony up and deal with the healthcare crisis. And this is the way they can do it. This is one of the ways they can do it, by funding the expansion of healthcare providers. Jobs, there are empty jobs out there, as you know. And we could use them in our economy, et cetera. Okay, so that's the what happened in the legislature. Any questions, comments? Okay. All right.